start as democratic. They first became good capitalists, which in my view is good. That's the best system to produce wealth. And afterwards they became democratic. This didn't happen in the Arab world. So this is a huge failure which explains much what's happening there. And what do we see there? We see a greater power of political Islam. As a religious person, I have great sympathy for political Islam, because they do good things for their people. They deliver education, they deliver social services, they deliver health. They are much more honest. They are less corrupt than the Arab leadership. I have a slight problem with the foreign policy, but we can live with that. We see a rise. We see this is precisely why they are powerful. This explains their appeal to the masses, because they do good things for their people. Unfortunately, I do not see political Islam as it is today in the Arab world as a modernizing agent. Therefore, they are going to be doomed to more poverty and more ignorance, which is not good for their societies. Religion doesn't have to be like this. But their version of religion brings them exactly to this point, when they disqualify half of the population from the working force, the women. They can't succeed in the 21st century. Sorry. In Gaza, they don't want a marathon if women participate in. I'm not particularly fond of women running 40 kilometers, but if they want to, fine. It's their privilege. They don't want it. This disqualification of half of the population is simply that does not going to bring them into the 21st century. So something is very wrong happening there. We see also fragmentation of the state. States lose control over the territories. Egypt, which is a historic state, lost control over Sinai. Even in the Delta, there is problems of law and order. We've seen in Libya, we've seen it, of course, in Syria today, but it's not something new. Iraq, Somalia, Lebanon, those are failed states by the Weberian test. No monopoly over use of force. All this happened before the Arab Spring. So there is something within the political culture in our area, in the Arab political culture, that does not allow them to function well as in states. And I'm saying it as a social scientist, as observing of a large phenomena. Another issue in trend, which is again not new, is the rise of non-Arab states. In our region, we see the decline of the Arabs, and as a result of it, rise of Iran, Turkey, and of course Israel. All of them are non-Arab. Iran is fortunate enough to have $60–80 billion to spend. It has imperial tradition. It wants to govern, to influence the region. It wants to export its version of Islam, which is a jihadist version. And recently it wants to have a nuclear weapon. All this, and they are increasing their influence in the Middle East. This is not something new. This happened before the Arab Spring. Same true of Turkey. Turkey, which in this audience I don't have to explain too much how Turkey gradually distanced itself from the West and is becoming more and more a regional, a Middle Eastern actor. For a while, Israel and Turkey shared the same feeling. We are in the Middle East, but we don't want to be there because the neighborhood is not so nice. And what happens? The Turks fall in love with their neighborhood. Everybody is entitled to his own taste, of course, but they are not part of the West. And but they are becoming stronger in this region with great ambitions. They also have an imperial tradition, and they've ruled this region just like the Persians. And It is a country with, that has been successful in partly modernizing because of Ataturk. The Arabs didn't have an Ataturk. So, of course, Turkey is in much better shape to influence the region than the Arabs. Israel, of course, is a small country, but powerful, economic, blooming economy, fully integrated into a globalized world. And I'll say a few more words about Israel later on. And the third trend, again, which is not new, perceived, and I emphasize the word perceived, retreat of American power, particularly with the Obama administration. But this started even before. After all, the ambitious project of bringing democracy to the Middle East was started by Bush. You know, I never had a good feeling, you know, for this crusade, this modern crusade to bring democracy to the Arab world. But I believe for a while, I admit that maybe American power, you know, and all those resources, maybe with strong will and enough time presence, maybe they'll make a change. But it failed. We know it failed. Iraq didn't become democratic. Iraq is a mess. Afghanistan, of all places, you know, to bring democracy to Afghanistan is indeed, you know, befits Americans with their great idealism, but it doesn't work, and they'll soon be out of Afghanistan. So we see a gradual retreat. Obama administration, before the Arab Spring, started with appeasement. You know, of course, it's not called appeasement. You know, there is a euphemism for, you know, engagement. You engage your enemies. The Obama administration engaged its enemies, Damascus, and engaged Iran, being nice to the enemies, trying to bring them over, smiling to them. And in the Middle East, you know, the people don't understand liberal language. You know, they have their limits. You know, they don't understand it. Somebody is engaging you, it's perceived as weakness, and it's taken advantage of. And indeed, Obama is perceived as a weakling. And when the Arab Spring came, it only was amplified. You know, he's a guy that betrays his old ally, Mubarak, stabbed in the back. This is how it was seen in the Middle East. You know, Gaddafi also. You know, what was wrong with Gaddafi? You know, Middle Easterns don't understand. You know, he played well with Americans. Gave up his weapons of mass destruction. He sold oil. What do you want from him? To be, you know, a Truman, you know, a Washington. You know. Come on, he's Gaddafi. So they allowed the Europeans, you know, for a variety of reasons, to have some courage, you know, limited courage, as you know, described before, to do something. And of course, what did they get? They didn't get anything better. Not only that, in Benghazi we saw an American diplomat being murdered with impunity. Once the Americans sent the Marines, you know, to take care of this type of situations. Nowadays, Obama is, you know, has a different style, which again, you know, whatever its merits are, being viewed in America, in the Middle East, is seen as weakness. So we see a weak America distinguishes itself from the Middle East. Of course, the most important thing is Iran, and Iran is laughing all the way to the bomb with its wonderful strategy of build and talk. They are talking to the gullible Europeans and to the gullible Americans, and in the meantime they are building their bomb. What are the implications for Israel of what happened? First of all, the good news. Let's face it, the power differential between Israel and its neighbors has grown. We are stronger, they become weaker. After all, we live in a power politic world, and they are less able to build national programs. They are less able to divert great resources to build a large conventional military. So basically, they are much less able to threaten Israel. They are killing each other, which, you know, we are not involved. But, you know, we are just onlookers. But this doesn't serve any national goals. You know, the more it continues in Syria or, you know, in other places, the more weak they'll become. So this is a basic, but there are other things which are important as well. First of all, we should recognize that there are strategic surprises. Despite the fact that the decline of the Arab state was known and documented and well analyzed, the fall of Mubarak was a surprise to the Israeli security intelligence services. We invest a lot of money in our intelligence. And actually, I don't blame them for this strategic surprise. It's very difficult to foresee great historical discontinuities. But what we have to learn from that is that we have to be ready for worst case scenarios. It's very easy to fall into, you know, into a mold of accepting rosy scenarios. You know, and people in the West want the good news. You know, we don't want to hear the bad news. It's so natural, you know, to tell people that say, oh no, it's going to be worse. You are exaggerating. But we should be ready for those type of exaggeration because it may happen. And we should be prepared for things that are not very pleasant. A third implication is the regional isolation. Israel, over the years, has lost the friendship of two important regional powers, Iran, after the revolution, Turkey, after Erdogan, and those are important states, powerful states, which we could balance to some extent the Arab enmity. We lost it. The peace process has been frozen. Quite clearly, the rise of political Islam is not conducive to peacemaking. For the Islamists, the mere existence of a Jewish state is a religious anathema, is a sacrilege. So they are not going to be easy on us. Hamas, which also, the rise to power of Hamas started before the Arab Spring. Their growing power within the Palestinian political entity is not conducive to peacemaking with Israel. I think that the decline, and I think it's temporary decline. I'm not sure that you know there is a literature debating whether American decline is inevitable. I do not share this view. I think that Americans eventually will come back. They have the potential, and eventually they'll overcome this historical accident of Obama presidency, and will snap back. But in the meantime, America is less able to influence regional allies. Even weak Abu Mazen says no to Obama. You know, he says, you know, go to discuss, talk to the Israelis. No, I don't want to. You know, Obama is coming to the Middle East. Believe me, nobody is really impressed. Nobody is making any gestures towards Americans, you know, because they want to be in good grace with Americans. And this is not good for Israel. Israel wants a strong America. Israel wants an America that is able to influence and compensate Israel and others for risks taken in the peace treaty, in peace negotiations. Another problem for us is in the area of deterrence. Israel's deterrence is primarily dependent upon its military might, or its perceived military might. And for that, we have to use it once in a while, for the Arabs not to forget that we can hit them hard. But our deterrence is not only dependent upon our own doing. Israeli deterrence is dependent also upon the perception, and I emphasize the perception, that in case of need, America will be next to us and will help us in times of crisis. And now this is not self-evident. Will America help Greece vis-a-vis Turkish revanchism? Do you bet on it? No, I don't think so. So the Turks understand it. So do the Arabs. So if this perception to some extent was a constraining factor upon Arab freedom of action against Israel, this is no, or it's still there, but it's not as strong as it was. I think we see also growing security risks. First of all, in the area of leadership miscalculation. We have new leaderships. Political Islam, as I mentioned before, has great experience in providing civilian services. They give health services, social work, education, but they are totally inexperienced in the area of defense and foreign affairs. And they may miscalculate. And I'll give you just one example. For example, the issue of the militarization of the Sinai Desert. Between Israel and Egypt, there is a Sinai Desert, 200 kilometers, that because of the peace treaty is demilitarized. No Egyptian heavy armed forces are allowed in, and this provides the strategic stability to the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. Basically, we cannot surprise them, they cannot surprise us. But unfortunately for political Islam in Egypt, and not only for them, the demilitarization clauses are seen as an affront to their national sovereignty, a constraint upon their national sovereignty, and they may miscalculate and bring in forces, and this could become a casus belli. We've been in Sinai in 48, 56, 67, 73, of course, we were already in Egypt. We may have to go again because the new leadership of Egypt will make a mistake. They tried recently, they made a mistake and they introduced forces. We convinced them to withdraw them via the American and to some extent direct talk. But this may happen again, and this is a serious miscalculation on their part. I think we'll see more terror for two reasons. One is that the states lose control over their territory. As a result of that, terrorist or sub-state groups will have greater freedom of action. There is no strong mukhabarat, there is no strong central police security services to limit their freedom of action. There are no preventive arrests. So we'll see more freedom of action on part of such groups. Second, we see more access to weapons. As countries lose control over their national arsenals, we've seen it in Libya. Some of the sensitive material, sensitive weapons from Libya came to Hamas, anti-air missiles, anti-tank missiles, and I don't know if you are aware, Israel is very concerned, but not only Israel, about what will happen to the chemical weapons in Syria. So those are problems for Israel. Another issue which is rather new, and it was to some extent mentioned before, is the threat to the East Mediterranean security. 90% of Israel's foreign trade goes via the Mediterranean. We are a Mediterranean country. The Arabs are too poor to buy our products. They buy something, but not really significant. So basically our trade goes via sea routes, mostly to the west, or if it goes to even to the east, it goes via the Suez Canal. We see a novel situation in the East Mediterranean, which has become an Islamic lake. Take a look at the map. I believe that you are better educated than most American students that don't know geography at all. Tunisia, Islamic. Following the election in Libya, greater role for the Islamists. Egypt, Islamist. Sinai, Egypt lost control over Sinai. The Islamists are roaming. All variety of groups, Al-Qaeda and others, are in Sinai. Go further east, Hamas rules Gaza. Israel, a Jewish country, pro-Western. Go further north, Lebanon, ruled by Hezbollah, an Islamist terrorist organization. Further north is Syria, in the throes of a civil war, and we don't know exactly, what will happen. I don't think that Assad will run out of bullets as the Europeans did in the Libyan campaign, but we don't know if he'll be able to survive the challenge. And he was never a great friend of the West, but the opposition, we know for sure. What are the cries of victory? We see it on TV. Akbar, Allah Akbar. It's quite clear. This is Islamist elements are very strong in the opposition. Further north is Turkey, which is, as I mentioned before, growingly problematic ally of the West, and I say it with some kind of British understatement. And then we have, of course, Greece and Cyprus, which are still pro-Western, part of the European Union, which is not a really important strategic actor. It doesn't have the capacity to do something, which was elaborated quite clearly by Professor Kuskovelli. But the Turks may have an appetite. We see already this appetite for energy resources, not only because of the money, but also because to buttress the role as an energy corridor to the West, and they may be tempted to take over southern Cyprus, or Cypriot Republic, which is, in military terms, a walk for them. There is no real force, and I don't think, from what I know, the Cypriots, and with all due respect to them, I don't think that they'll be going, to deter the Turks or to do much damage to a Turkish force there. So we may see tensions there over energy resources, and this is problematic for Israel, of course. The final issue, in terms of what happened, the Iranians got at least one more year to build on their bomb. The world attention was diverted to issue of democracy in Tunisia, which, with all due respect, is not that important. Egypt is very important, but so this year was served well, the Iranian foreign policy, in gaining more time, which is a problem for Israel. Not only for us, we are seeing basically on this issue an ostrich syndrome. The world is behaving like an ostrich, preferring not to recognize the bad news. And I can give a long lecture about it, but I'll leave it to another opportunity when I'll be invited here. What are Israeli responses to what's happening? Basically, we have to invest more in our defense budget. We need a larger military to deal with the southern front, with the northern front, which were quiet for many years. We need a larger navy to defend our newly found gas resources. We have to spend more on R&D, which is extremely important, research and development. This is basically what keeps us ahead of our rivals. The small boxes we put in the American weapons. This is what keeps Israeli superiority, because much of the Arab world has exactly the same platforms. And we are superior only because we put those small gadgets on it. We have to invest in missile defense. We are the best in the world in this area. We have the best technology. The Americans understand it and put money in order to develop it. Now with their cuts in their defense budget, it's not clear to us how it will affect those programs. Probably only very marginal, because they understand the importance of it. But we have to do our share. Quite clear for us, it's no time to take chances. We have an imperative for defensible borders. We are very lucky not to be tempted to give up the Golan Heights, 10, 15 years ago. The Golan Heights are an important strategic asset for us, vis-a-vis the chaos in Syria. We need to forge strategic alliances, primarily to nourish the United States. There is no replacement for the United States. Maybe we'll, with Greek lobby in Washington, we'll try to educate the Americans.
We're expecting a Jewish lobby.
Yeah, no, we'll do it together, you know. Yeah, okay. And of course, we are happy to develop a new relationship with Greece. You know, but, you know, I'll be honest with you. You know, Greece was all, does not carry the same strategic weight as a country like Turkey. So Greece, Cyprus is important, but is not the substitute for what we lost. There are Kurds who have to be, you know, maybe brought into this, you know, equation. There is Southern Sudan, a new country which appeals to Israel, wants Israel's experience. And, you know, some Balkan countries like Romania and others are looking for an Israeli friendship, and we can work together. Finally, the hour of decision on Iran gets closer. This is not an easy decision. In Israel, more or less, everybody is convinced that sanctions don't work, that the American policy is a failure, and only military action will remove a nuclear threat. This is, however, a political decision. Will Israel do it? I don't know. If I know, I wouldn't tell you. But basically, it's not an easy decision, but the time gets closer. I want to end, you know, with an optimist note. I'm an optimist by nature, and I think my optimism for Israel is justified. We are a strong country. We have a strong economy. We did much better than most Western countries in the recent economic crisis. I don't know who did better, Greece or Israel. You know, you got German money. You know, that's a different story.
You spend it.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm ready to spend it as well. But we did very well. We have a strong military. I think the Israeli society is extremely resilient, ready, you know, has no illusions that the peace is around the corner, and is ready to fight if needed. So with the right leadership, I think we'll be able to weather the problematic environment in which we are finding ourselves, and inshallah, we'll do well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for a very interesting, a very vivid and very thorough presentation. A lot of interesting, a lot of important things have been heard. First of all, Israel and the rest of the West, we were totally surprised regarding the Arab Spring, and this is true. Professor Kuskouvelis also said that. Then the political Islam, and this is very important, and I connect that with the Quranic lyrics. It's extremely good in providing social services, however, it's not very well experienced yet, allow me to add, regarding the governing and strategic planning, etc., etc. Professor Ilban said that Turkey cannot counterbalance, that Greece and Cyprus cannot counterbalance the loss of Turkey. Personally, for Israel, allow me to disagree, Professor, and I'm going to remind you.
Prove it.
I'm going to remind you. I will. I'm going to remind you a very interesting legend, let's say. There is a David and Goliath, and finally David won. All right, so I believe that Greece and Cyprus are more reliable allies than Turkey, that is facing, let's say, the syndrome of a larger or hegemonic state, right? And I don't believe that this is due to AKP policy or Erdogan's policy, but this is due to, such as Merzheimer is saying, the syndrome of a huge state. Anyway, the opportunity for our students and for our esteemed colleagues is here in order to pose questions to both of our speakers.
Yeah, showing one speaker.
Basically to Professor Lupan. Yes, Professor Fotini Bellu.
I have several questions, but I will limit myself to a couple of questions. You spoke about US weakness. Do you think that this weakness will last? And it seems to me that rather than being a weakness, it might be a cautious perspective, looking for the situation to develop fully, or at least to have a cautious approach, initial approach, unless the situation evolves further. This is my first question. And the second question, do you believe that this Turkish attitude will last? Because as far as we have understood, according to your very well presented argumentation, but also for what's going on Turkish strategic opportunities nowadays, we figure out that there are some doors basically need to open as regards Israeli and Turkish relations. And I'm talking about the energy sector. What's your approach on that?
I don't think Turkey will change anyway, as long as this government is in power. I think Erdogan and the current elite sees itself as leaders of the Muslim Arab world. Israel bashing serves them well. Unfortunately, the Americans, Erdogan is Obama's best friend. That's what Obama said, yeah? So we were hoping that the Americans would put greater pressure on the Turks to behave, but they don't, which is part of their weakness. I think basically the Americanization doesn't get what's happening. They don't understand. They have a different lens, and I don't think you can understand the Middle East with liberal lens. Maybe you can understand what's happening in Western Europe. Maybe you can understand what happens in certain other parts of the world. For the Middle East, you need a realpolitik lens, and if you don't have it, that's it. On what will happen in the future in Turkey, I don't know. After all, AKP didn't get over 50%. If Erdogan goes, he's an extremely popular politician. He's a very skillful politician, charismatic politician. The problem, I think, in Turkey has been the failure on the secular elites to produce good leadership. So the theater, was open for the AKP, and I think also the secularists went too far. As a religious person, I understand that religion is an important factor in human life, and it's I believe there should be a synthesis between tradition and modernity. I'm not sure that the AKP synthesis is the right one. I like Raki, for example. So they don't. Some of them do, but just a vignette. I have good relations with religious elements in Turkey. Some of them, they see me with yarmulke. They believe that. Also, they see Israel as some kind of model. In in which there is no clear separation between church and state, like here, you know. So once they invited me for dinner, and what do you want? They asked me, what do you want to drink? And I like raki, but I didn't say anything. What are you going to drink? I asked him, you know, like a good Jew answers the question. And so I said, I'll drink raki. I said, sure, you know, raki, you know, what's happening? He said, in the Quran is written only wine. So fine, you know, if you can do this extrapolation, I'm okay with you. So I also drank raki, but not everybody is ready to. By the way, I met dignitaries, you know, of the AKP dignitaries who were drinking wine at the same table, and they said when they are you know, in official business they can drink. In official business I cannot eat non-kosher food, so you know, it was a novelty for me, but that's fine. So there is certain flexibility in Islam. Generally, you know, religions, you know, let's face it, we choose our verses. You know, there are liberal versions of religion. Why? Because we choose to one verse over another. We give it a different interpretation. I think Islam is not determined to be backward. If there will be a leader that will choose the right verses. I don't see the leader, but you know, one day maybe they'll have a leader, they'll choose the right verses, and will be a reformation. Christianity, you know, in the West had a reformation. Why? Because they choose the right verses, different verses. They made a different interpretation. So this may happen. I don't know what will happen in Turkey, but so far it doesn't look very promising.
My question is for Professor Inbar. I'm sorry, sir, about the spelling of the name. I don't know if there's the correct one. My question is related with the energy issue in the Eastern Mediterranean area. According to many articles which released in the news lately, they support that the transfer of gas from Eastern Mediterranean area to Europe, it's the best way to transfer the gas is through the Turkey corridor, through the Turkish pipelines, because a variety of reasons, because it is cheaper, it is more secure, because we have fewer complications. Instead of that, Israel seems to be closer to the idea to transfer the gas through the Cyprus and the Greece to the European market. I would like your comment on that, sir. Thank you.
At the current stage, you don't want to strengthen the ability of the Turks to hold European by the balls on the energy issue. So, you know, we prefer to do it via Cyprus and Greece. I think also you're involving the Russians in it, because they are a better insurance you know, policies than Americans or others, and so we understand the geopolitics of it. This is how it's being played so far. Having said that, if we have so much, we'll be ready to sell to everybody, you know, for the right price. Yeah, you wouldn't blame us. I understand you are a fellow paratrooper also.
Thank you very much. Next question. Και μετά ο...
Hello, good afternoon, dear professors. I would like to ask Professor Efraim, I'm not sure if I'm spelling Inbar. Do you agree with the term?
It's easy, Inbar.
Inbar, all right. I would like to ask you if you agree with the term post-Arab Spring, and if you are expecting a second wave, having seen that the Bahrain revolution was stopped by the Saudi Arabia troops and Kuwait.
We may see reverberations of the Syrian crisis in Jordan, for example, in Lebanon, even in Turkey. The monarchies in the Arab world, for reasons I not fully understand, I may have some explanation, are doing better. Particularly the Gulf countries have a lot of money to buy their people. Most of the people are not interested in freedom. Let's face it. Most people are interested in leading a decent life. Most people are not political. You know, you are students, you are more, but you are not the typical, what is the rate of the people that vote in this country?
What is the
ratio?
18. At the age of 18.
No. How many people vote in elections? 40%?
No, more.
50?
More than that, yeah.
Whatever, 60. But there is a lot, 40% that are not participating. This is, in most Western countries. So people are not always interested in freedom. Also, the Arab Spring is about economic issues. I'm not sure it's about freedom. So therefore, the countries that have at their disposal great resources to buy their people will be better off. But a country like Saudi Arabia is always at the risk of having one of the princes with a lot of ambition. So far they've done a lot of extremely well. I don't know if you know how the system works. Saud had several wives, and and they are the families of the wives, the sons of the different wives were ruling each after other, and so far there was peace and quiet in the family. But if one of the princes is not satisfied and has ambition, and people sometimes are ambitious, colonels are ambitious, you know it from your own country. So we may see a rebellion there and disaster. Obviously, systems that are not democratic are less stable by nature because they don't have this cushion of legitimacy. There may be problems. A second wave, maybe. In any way, I want to make it clear that outsiders can do very little to change. I think the Western ambitions for political engineering in the Middle East are totally misguided.
What you can see as well is a reverse. If you watch what is going on in Tunisia, especially when they assassinated the leader of the opposition, and especially what they have started doing with especially women's rights in Tunisia, things are showing that the spring is according to our standards. It is becoming the winter. And I strongly advise you either through internet or through satellite TVs to watch the events there. You can have on TV5 midnight you have Africa News, and you can have every night what is going on in Tunisia. And you know something, Tunisians are not like Libyans and much less like Egyptians. They're quite different. They're very, if I may use the term, Europeanized, and a big part of their elite and intelligentsia is pro-European, and these people right now have started suffering because the Salafists are taking power, and that will be a problem for them. So the much celebrated spring, at least in Tunisia, is becoming, as I said earlier, and when I was using the term spring, I was always underlining in quotation marks, I used to say 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and this is what is happening right now. Just follow the news and you will see that what Europeans thought or the State Department or the US government thought it would have been a democratization process and progress did not happen. That's the one thing. They're making the same mistake as they did 20 years ago in Eastern Europe. A society that it is organized on the premises of the UMA or Yuma cannot move, cannot transit from a theocratic and almost feudal, a conservative political system and an almost feudal economic system to a democracy. They have just unleashed forces. These forces are very strong, and I don't think they can manage them. You can see what is going on in Egypt. Every day there are demonstrations, and the Muslim Brotherhood has seized the state and is using the state against its enemies. So all these people who were liberals or who were even in the left, they have risked a lot, and they have gained almost anything. This is just a political analysis, not to discuss at all the international risks and the risks to stability, especially with Egypt. The loss of control of the Sinai Peninsula is one of them, but we will see.
Thank you very much. Dear professors, thank you very much for your very interesting presentations. I would like to ask you, first to Professor, and after my Professor, what's the situation? Israel, after the divorce with Turkey, a long divorce, and we know, and I believe that you know what I mean, tried to find out a new strategic partner in the region. This is the reality, because you know that very well that alone you cannot face the situation in the area. On the other hand, Greece, because of the situation, economic crisis and all these things, trying to find out a new strategic partner for their reasons. So, do you believe that with your hand on your heart, and I don't want only your opinion, I would like your nation feeling about this. Can you find a strong strategic partner? Can Greece be your strategic partner in the region? And the same question to Mr. Voskouvelis. Can Israel be a strong strategic partner? Because it's real, the reality is that we don't feel very comfortable with this situation, Arabic Spring, winter, or whatever. So, thank you very much.
Well, there is a cultural ambience, of course. The two pillars of Western civilization, Jerusalem and Athens. I think Israelis have a sense of history, and so this is conducive to this type of partnership. I think I don't know if you are aware. Greek music extremely popular in Israel. On every radio station, you hear a lot of Greek music, and in the so there is some kind of cultural ambience which is very genuine. but the political relationship between the two countries, you know, had its ups and downs. So now there is a clear moment when we share strategic interests, clear strategic interests, facing revisionist Turkey, having a clear interest in making sure that energy resources in the East Mediterranean are well utilized and get safely to the Europeans. I think we have also a certain responsibility, you know, as I mentioned before, to do a lot of homework in Washington. It's not only, you know, the two countries. We need, you know, in this type of situation, we need a strong America which is actually paying attention more to Asia. It's, you know, I'm sure you are aware that the pivoting strategy to Asia. They cut their naval forces. They just removed one carrier from the Persian Gulf, which I think is a terrible, you know, signal for the Iranians and for the rest of the. There is also a common agenda to make the Europeans wake up. Most, you know, Western Europeans, Eastern Europeans are different. You know, New Europe is different. It's okay, but West Europe lives in a dreamland. You know, they see no enemies. Use of force is, you know, anachronistic in their strategic culture. So there is, you know, a lot of issues that we can do together because it's our clear interest to do so. In this respect, you know, having a clear realpolitik outlook on international affairs, we are good partners. We don't do it because only we like each other. We do it because we need each other, right? And, you know, there is some merit in this type of, you know, situation. Marriages are many times, you know, work not only because of love, because you need each other, you know. A lot of young people here, women, you know, still romantic, but, you know, we have a little bit of gray hair. We know the situation is different. So this is the hardcore of a strategic alliance. I don't know, you know, are we going to fight together? I don't know. We are not at that stage yet. But should we prepare contingency plans for a threat in Cyprus? I think we should. But together with NATO. It's not, you know, the Israelis and the Greeks are going to face you know, stage 2 of the Turkish invasion of Cyprus. So there is a lot of things we can do together. In this respect, you can count on us and we can count on you because it serves your interests.
There are not many points on which I disagree. In the whole analysis which I followed from the main argument that Professor Inbar has developed is that the problem with Turkey is due basically to the AKP government. Of course, the AKP government has accelerated things, but even when 25 years ago, Ozal was in power, who happened to be neo-Ottoman too, we had the same acceleration. The reason why Turkey is behaving that way is its size. I have rather an analysis which is based on power and the consequences of this power rather than... Sorry?
You want to divide Turkey?
No. Whether I want to divide Turkey? Well...
he knows what I mean.
Yeah, I know what he means. Well, there is it's called I'm following on the internet the Kurdistan news, and I'm not the one who wishes anything, but there are others in the region who may work on that direction, and I believe that what is happening in Syria will backlash, and it has already backclashed to Turkey. Turkey was afraid of the PKK, of the PKK within Turkey, and then the next fear was the Kurdistan in northern Iraq, and there were no so great problems with the Kurdistan in Iraq because they found a modus vivendi given the need of northern Iraq to export its oil via Turkey. Now the problem has come from the Kurdish within Syria, and this, as we say, this box, the Syrian box, was opened basically by Turkey. So there is a PKK issue, a Pandora box. Syria is a Pandora box. So I think independently of whether the current government is in power, be it Erdogan or we don't know who is going to be his successor, Davutoglu, Ozal, or whoever comes up in the future, or some people with related to the governments that they were in power for many years in the 20th century, replace them. I don't think Turkey is going to change behavior because it is a big country. Its population is about 70 million, has the largest army, or the second largest army in NATO, many borders, but also many problems and many disputes. So I think they will continue, as Davutoglu says, they will try to continue behaving as a heavyweight boxer, wrestler. That's his expression in his book. We are a heavyweight wrestler, and we should play in the league with heavyweight wrestlers and leave Greece and Syria aside. But they did not do that. They continued wrestling the heavyweight with middleweight wrestlers, and they will continue doing so because of the size and the power of the state. I believe that in politics marriages of convenience are possible, and they may turn out to be the best. In fact, I believe, and this is what I said in a previous discussion we had here with another professor from Israel, I said that Israel lacks, in a way, lacks strategic depth. You mentioned that. You mentioned the need for Navy, right? Obviously, the Jewish diaspora, as the Greek diaspora, provide a certain strategic depth. Yet, for military and operational reasons, the Mediterranean, Cyprus, Crete, and this entire maritime body is, I think, an area which Israel, and I'm certain they have done that, should examine and adopt it as its strategic depth. We had the military naval exercises between the two navies in the southern Aegean and even in the areas between the Peloponnese and Crete. This has happened last summer. So cooperation has started, and we'll see. I think both countries have to gain, and you know what has happened? Israel was putting all the eggs in one basket, Turkey, and Greece in a way was putting all the eggs in one basket, the Arab world. So things may be more balanced, and this could be a beginning. Now, when things get balanced, people start thinking better and have a clear view of what they want, and they may have a clearer view of the future. So I think it was a good start that was brought about by the need of balancing with countries that are not the best. They don't have the best record in terms of peace, security, and stability.
I'm sorry. Okay. I assume you're referring to me. Okay, thank you. Thank you. My question goes, of course, for Professor Inbar. Today, as we speak, is the first day of a common naval exercise between Greece, Israel, and the United States that will last for 2 weeks. Do you expect that we'll see more of that in the upcoming years? I mean, do you estimate that Israel will more actively show its tendency to bring this marriage or engagement, whatever it is, with Greece closer with such joint exercises?
The answer is clearly positive, because we want to be more integrated into NATO. And Greece is a NATO participant, a NATO ally. We want definitely to have the Europeans a better understanding of our dilemmas. And Greece has two voices in EU and Cyprus. So for us, it serves our interest. We want to bring in the Americans more, of course. We don't want them to evaporate to Asia. Not that it's not important. I think that makes some sense, paying attention to what China is doing. But the East Mediterranean is still an important part. So we have so much in common, in terms of hard interest, that I think it will continue. If leadership in our countries, behave responsibly. That's all. It's a political decision. I think from what I know of the Israeli military and our strategic establishment, it's quite clear that this is something we are very much interested in.
All right, final question, privilege of the chair. Professor, do you believe that democracy can coexist within an Islamic framework? I mean, can democracy exist within an Islamic framework? Islam and democracy can coexist together?
I'm not an expert on Islam, but as I mentioned before, I think that no religion cannot, be flexible enough. If you have the right, religious leadership, they'll choose the right verse and they'll say that, this is what Allah said, and that's fine. The believers will go for it.
So democratic peace theory cannot bring the fruits that it promised to bring to the West?
Listen, if it will take a long time for the Islamic world to become democratic. We see, by the way, we should differentiate between Islam and Arabs. There is a lot of Muslims. Indonesia behaves differently. Malaya behaves differently, and even Turkey behaves differently than from the Arabs in domestic terms. So we see a variation, along Islamic countries on the issue of democracy, and I would not, again, I don't know enough about Islam to say categorically that Islam is incompatible with democracy.
Now what we're going to do, there are many questions and there's a lot of discussion. Professor brought us the bulletin from the famous Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. Obviously, they have a site that you may find by just Begin Sadat Center of BSA, and we will discuss, and I think we can have a link from our laboratory to their institute and vice versa. So if you want to know more, for example, their last bulletin is the end of Syria, ? So there is a discussion on this topic. This is something you may find out by visiting the center, and you will see there also articles and work from our Israeli colleagues. There is one more common thing that there is a school of international relations studies in Israel and in Greece, and this is something common. What I mentioned earlier is that the relations of professor and other professors from Israel date back to the late 80s I was not then in Greece, but with Platias and Iphistos and other people, you know each other for more than 20 years, and this shows that I don't know any other people of international relations in the region. So I think this is something else in common, and in that sense, we enjoy having colleagues of ours in this University of Macedonia. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you. It was a great night. Καλή Τσικνοπέμπτη.
Τους βλέπω είναι έτσι.